Hi guys, I'm Maureen Richards and I'm your course director for Host Defense and Host Response. And this is your first case of the Host Defense, Host Response block. So I don't know if you've taken a look yet at this self-study guide. You have to have looked at some of it because you found this right here, the hyperlink that says how to survive this self-study guide, which is the video that I'm recording right now. This is a really long self-study guide. If you compare it to the ones that you saw in the foundations block, they were maybe only, 30 to 40 pages long, and this one is 60. So what the heck am I doing to you? I'm going to take you through this to show you how to manage it. It is likely that the first case in most blocks will have a slightly longer self-study guide, just because we have to give you some of that foundational material so we have something to work with. But I've tried to pare it down in such a way that it is manageable, and I'll kind of take you through how you can handle it. So the first page, just table of contents, like you can see here. If there is a video associated with any of the disciplines, I have listed it here, the hyperlink to that video. Most of the videos for microbiology and immunology are housed on my YouTube page, but things like pharmacology and pathology and histology might be housed on a different page. So I've always provided the hyperlink for you and you can go directly to it. You don't need to keep track of this page though, because throughout the document, I also hyperlink the videos wherever they're actually appropriate to watch. So what I recommend you do is just kind of page through immediately. The first page is the interview of Jamie Lopez, our patient for this case. You can link to the video here and give it a quick watch. It's only about 2 minutes long, and it's really just Mr. Lopez explaining why he came into clinic today. Then you get into the actual kind of meat of the material. So we start right off with microbiology. Now, in the Cameron-Thompson case, we went through kind of the basic structures and replication cycles of viruses. So now we're basically going to go through the basic material for bacteriology. With this material, and I'm going to show you where all of this is, really just read through it. We're going to apply all of this information as we go through the bug parade that I'm about to take you on, which is all of the microbiological organisms that want to kill you. So we're going to start with bacteria in this case, and then in future cases we'll also add in parasites and fungi. So just give this a read, just have an idea of what these words are so that when I say it's a gram-positive cocci, you have an idea that, oh, that's a sphere. There are a couple of videos that are pretty quick that you can watch. Most of them are sources that I found outside. Gram staining is pretty important to know, and that also tells you about the structure of the bacterial cell wall, be it gram-positive or gram-negative. So make sure you understand that. Otherwise, most of this stuff we're going to cover as we need it. So if you just give it a quick read, then maybe a quick watch of the videos, don't spend too much time here. If you're spending more than an hour on pages, 3 through, it goes on for a little bit, 3 through about 14, you've spent too long. So really just a read to make sure you kind of know some of the terms so that later when I say things like this organism produces spores, you have an idea of what a spore is. And even if you don't, I'll remind you. Okay, then we get into the important stuff. Now we get into the actual microbes. So the microbes that we're going to cover today are the streptococci, the staphylococci, the clostridia, and one type of the bacillus. The streptococci, staphylococci, and clostridia are 3 of the most important bacterial families you are going to learn about in medical school. Step 1 loves them. They are ubiquitous. Everybody can get sick with them. They cause a wide range of horrifying diseases, all the way down to really simple diseases. You have to know your strep and staph and clostridia. So we start right off with them so that you have plenty of time to learn them. So starting at about page 15, I go into the strep, and there's lots of videos for strep, and they're hyperlinked throughout. So this goes into one type of strep. The only one we're going to talk about in this particular self-study is group A strep, which is strep pyogenes. It's the one that causes strep throat. So you'll go through all of group A strep, the diseases it causes, some things that are associated with it. Then you get to staph. Staph is another beast. And I've made a couple of videos about the 3 staphylococcal organisms that we'll cover today: Staph aureus, Staph epidermidis, and Staph saprophyticus. There are a whole bunch of other staph organisms that we're not going to cover in as much detail. And then the next organism we go through, after we get through all the diseases in these guys, is Clostridia. With staph, strep, and Clostridia, it's really important that you learn your toxins. Toxins mediate disease, and I make note of those throughout the self-study and in all the videos, so make sure you're paying attention to that. So then we get into the Clostridia and the various diseases. We're only going to talk about one type of Clostridia here, and that's C. perfringens. There are 3 others that I'll mention that are also part of the gas gangrene group, but the main one to know is Clostridia perfringens. Then we do Bacillus anthracis. Just once again, know your toxin structures, know your toxins, know your diseases. And then that's it for microbiology. Then we get into immunology. Immunology for this one is pretty short. I'm just kind of introducing you to the immune system. And you say, wait a minute, we already did that in Cameron Thompson Part 1. Well, kind of. You learned about the cells. Now we're going to learn about the actual immune response. So we start with innate versus adaptive, which are 2 types of immune responses. The goals of the innate immune response, hint, the innate immune response comes first. And then how pathogens are recognized by the immune system. Once again, you can see that anywhere that I've made a video, the video is hyperlinked throughout the document. There are study questions that will help you go through this. We also do a bit of an introduction to cytokines here, and cytokines we will go through again and again and again. If you want to be successful in immunology, if you actually want to know immunology, you have to know your cytokines. Cytokines make the whole show run, so you have to know them. And I split them into tables, and I'll introduce more and more cytokines as we go through the curriculum. Okay, after immunology, it's Dr. Bradrick's turn with pharmacology. In this self-study, he's really just kind of introducing you to antibiotics. So he's got an introduction to antibiotics lecture here. It's about an hour long, and then it will take you through pretty much the whole course note. The difference between bactericidal versus bacteriostatic drugs. He'll introduce the concept of antibiotic resistance, which should tie in nicely with some of what I talk about in the staphylococci. And then we also go into kind of how some of these things are calculated, the MBC and the MIC. Those are important concepts to understand. And then this one is one I would spend some time on, the classification of antibiotics. Students ask me every year, how should they learn their antibiotics? I'm not a pharmacologist, but being a microbiologist, I have a good understanding of antibiotics. And the thing I always tell them is step 1 is know these lists. Be able to identify the antibiotics that are a cell wall inhibitor, a bacterial protein synthesis inhibitor, and a nucleic acid inhibitor. If you can do that, you already kind of have a list of antibiotics and organisms they might work with. It might not make sense now, but as you go through it and as we go through more and more organisms, you'll see how much understanding these classifications can help. He then briefly introduces the mechanism of action of each of these, so starting with the cell wall inhibitors, then protein synthesis inhibitors, then nucleic acid inhibitors. Okay, and that's all of pharmacology. That's actually the bulk of this self-study. So remember, the first 12 pages or so that are all on that general bacteriology stuff, just give it a read. Don't spend too much time on it, no more than an hour. Devote your time to the microorganisms, a little bit of immunology, and pharmacology. And then we get into pathology. Dr. Poole has provided this self-study. He wants you to read a general summary from page 60 of Robbins, which I've hyperlinked directly to the page that you need to read here. And he's got a short course note that goes with it. Now, we get to histology. So histology is run by Dr. Al Ghul. She's your discipline director. She'll be running a connective tissue lab for you guys in the next couple of days. So a lot of this material will be covered in the lab. A little bit of it might be covered in your readiness assessment, and I've provided some study questions with Dr. Al Ghul for you to look at to manage the material, but most of this material is for your connective tissue lab. She has 4 videos. I've hyperlinked them here. Okay, moving right along, we're almost done, guys. So once we get past histology, we have psychiatry. So psychiatry is run by one of our staff psychiatrists, Dr. Dance. He has a couple of pages on obsessive compulsive disorder out of this textbook that he wants you to read. This is a library hyperlink, so remember, you might need to log into the library to do it, but I've provided the link and kind of an outline of what portions of it you need to read. Okay, that still looks like a ton of material, right? Well, once again, we have these study questions, CBCL study questions. So I've provided 45 of them here, and they're designed to help you get through the material. The first 5 or 6 really just kind of take you through that bacteriology self-study that I told you not to spend too much time on. This is to make it even shorter. So if you're going through the bacteriology self-study and you can answer kind of these questions just kind of in broad strokes, then you're doing fine. Then we get into the microorganisms. Make sure you really have these nailed, that you know how to answer these questions and can really differentiate them. Same with immunology, and obviously with pharmacology. When we get down further, you'll come across the CT questions. Again, like I mentioned before, most of this is meant to actually be covered in your histology lab, but some of it we might discuss a little bit in the case, so that's why it's included here. And then there's a couple questions on psychiatry that I actually recommend you use to go through the readings that Dr. Dance provided you. And that's it. That's the whole self-study. Here's some references. There is one more thing I'll draw your attention to down here, this pathophysiology. You'll note that it didn't have a pathophysiology section in your self-study, and there are no study questions for it. This is actually just a review article that Dr. Shah and Dr. Hartley recommend when discussing cases like our patient, Mr. Lopez. So when you get a chance, give this one a read. I wouldn't prioritize it above the rest of the material in the self-study because that material I think is a little bit more apropos to getting you through the readiness assessment and for the actual case discussion itself in the CBCL, but certainly in the clinical skills session, a lot of the principles in this review will be used. The nice thing about this review is that it's kind of a nice overview of everything else that we've discussed in this self-study, so it kind of ties it all together from a clinical perspective, so it's definitely worth a read. Okay, so that's kind of the self-study. I know it's a lot. I think you can get through it. Yes, you do need to start early, but if you have any problems, feel free to contact me anytime. Good luck.